Climate change is here, and anybody who doesn't believe it, just get up and look out the window. You'll see it.
The water's getting higher, the sea level, there seems to be more storm surges, there seems to be more storms, period.
We're seeing it all the time. There's more and more. The tides never seem to be low anymore. They seem to be high, and higher.
If we do get some sou'westers, you're going to see about 3 feet go off those banks every time they start pounding.
I mean, if you look at the mainland, their coastlines are basically made up of granite and heavy rock. Ours is made up of sandstone, which is easily tearing down.
This was a point. All this was a point coming away out to here, and we used to pull our boats up. Now it's all gone, eh?
Even just the natural erosion in the springtime, from freeze and thaw, you get a storm, it multiplies that by a factor of probably hundreds of thousands.
People are saying when I was a kid, there used to be all kinds of bank swallows along the shore. Now we hardly ever see one. What's causing that?
And you notice that that's a soft bank. Every time the waves pound that thing, it just comes down a bit. If you get a little more frost, it goes faster because the top of it gets the frost in it and comes down in big clumps then. And then it can't build up down below because the tides are getting higher. The cliff swallows are all gone. Those banks used to have hundreds of cliff swallows. Now that it's falling around so much, they can't get their holes. They dig in about, quite a little ways, and they're all gone. I haven't seen any for 40 years or so we're speaking of.
People are also talking about species like the piping plover, with the ravages of storm surges destroying their nests. Those storms are going to become more frequent. Is it going to be hard for the piping plover, which is already an endangered species, to live here on PEI?
We're losing so much coastline that we don't have that buffer area along the coastline.
I talked to one guy who he's been putting out the buoys in Rustico for the last 30 years.
I've been putting the buoys out, marking the harbour here, probably 35 years.
Tides are different. Tides are changing.
It's high tide and higher. There's no high and low. Like years ago, you get a low tide, you can get a bucket of clams anywhere, tide would be low. Now it's very seldom that you get a low tide.
Like the fisherman in Victoria that told me that he's noticed when you tie up your boat, like the water's higher now because the boat is closer to the top of the wharf.
Whether it's because the ice is melting up north or in a pot, hot water is higher than cold water, so.
Like that lighthouse up in up West Point, the tide came in so high, it was right up to the foundation of the lighthouse. And there had been a big sand dune and a boardwalk and everything in front of it. And was all washed out in one storm. And unfortunately, those types of storms are going to get more frequent.
We bought the land in '60, and we moved the trailer. We were able to use it until the early '80s. By that time, we'd no land left. Well, you can see the red there in the water, and then the blue beyond that. Okay, we would be out in that red area. Far out in that red area. We saw it coming. We moved it back 3 times from the edge of the bank. One storm would come out here and it was balancing on the top of the bank. And when the big wave would come in, it was just a cloud of red. We couldn't see the cottage at that point when the wave would hit. And we were sure that it would be gone.
There's never been a state of emergency declared in this village yet. The closest one we had was about 2 years ago when we had, I guess they call it the 100-year tidal surge.
21st of December, and that's the first day of winter. And then at that time, it was the full moon, and we had a storm. It lasted 2 or 3, 4 days.
Started coming over the wharf approximately around 3 p.m. and at about 5 p.m. the water had got to about an elevation on this post of this high.
Streets down close to the wharf had approximately 1 meter of water on the streets, which cut off the lower end of the village out towards Rustico Harbour. Couldn't get through with any equipment.
I got about 360 feet of waterfront. Well, 15 feet of land was gone. Like I said, I got my own private wharf. Well, the wharf was gone. I had to build a new wharf.
So it covered this whole area. The park was pretty well all covered. The street over here to our right was completely underwater, which isolated all of the residents on that end of town.
It was almost up to the centre of the community here. We had to barricade off several of the streets, and I think there was 85 homes that were completely isolated due to the water.
There's a bridge right at the end of my property, like the main bridge, and that bridge was closed down for 2 days because the tide was over the bridge, and there was like driftwood and stuff on the bridge after, so you had to clean it off.
The one up here about 6 miles up the road, Oysterbed Bridge, it was put out of commission for at least 6 or 8 weeks.
We made a presentation one day at the Gulf Shore School in North Rustico, shortly after the December 21st, 2010 storm surge. The kids were all very interested in it, and they all remembered going across one of those bridges on a bus where the waves were crashing over the side of the bridge, and they had never seen that before. It may be a day that they'll remember for the rest of their life.
It greatly affects our sewer system. From the sea tide pushing in, the water was shooting out of this manhole about this high on that day. When the tide gets that high, we can't handle the amount of stormwater coming into the sanitary system, so we need to address that situation.
Saltwater intrusion in aquifers. We've done a couple of studies on that. We're kind of concerned about sea level rise causing more penetration of the salt water into freshwater.
All water in PEI is groundwater, so it's well water. It's pumped up and fed through a distribution system.
There's getting to be more frequent instances of salt water showing up in their wells.
This is the lift station that collects all the sewage from North Rustico. All of the water comes to this point and then gets pumped through the treatment process. So every gallon of water that every home uses, on average about 65,000 gallons a day right now, comes to this spot right here. On December 21st, on the storm surge, when I seen how high the water was coming in the afternoon, I sandbagged this off as best I could to try and keep the water from going in it. At about, I'm going to say about 3:30, they no longer let us down this road because there was so much water. The Department of Highways brought a snowplow in around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and that was really the peak of the storm. And he dropped me off at the road. I had rubber boots on, and the water was over my rubber boots at the road. It's around 300,000 gallons in 6 hours that we got.
That was probably, I'd say, 20, 25 years since we had a storm like that bad. We had them before, like you get them every now and then, but they're more often now too.
We're leaning more towards the weather-related events now, sitting on the ocean, especially with the hurricane systems now are changing and becoming more frequent and getting a lot closer every day to be prepared for that type of an event.
We're trying to get the treatment plant out of the community park. We're looking to move it to higher ground. It would need to be the 3 acts of government to get together to make it happen.
And that's the thing. We live on an island and it's shrinking.
I'm sure that all communities on PEI that are on the water, if not now, will very soon be affected by sea level rise.
But if it keeps going the way it's going in 50 years, and like if the tide keeps coming and coming, we're gonna have to raise the island.
All those things are adding up, and like we're going to have to do something about our road construction, our bridge construction, and shoreline protection systems. It's a significant issue, I think.